Division of Education, Innovation and Energy welcomes you to its e-learning program. I'm your biology teacher, Lenetta Cowie-Clark, and today we'll be looking at part 1 of a 2-part series on transport in plants and animals. So our objectives today are to get you to be able to explain the need for transport. You should be able to describe structure and function of the circulatory system in humans, state and explain functions of blood components, and explain the role of blood in the defense against diseases. So let's get started. So here we know our favorite cartoon, SpongeBob on the right as well. So how is it that some organisms like sponges can simply take in water and other nutrients that they need? Why can't we just simply sit in a tub of water and take in all the water that we need or all the nutrients that we need? So in order to explain why some organisms can do that and others can't, we need to perform some simple mathematical equations to explain that concept. So here we have 3 cubes. And because they are cubes, they are carrying the same dimensions on each side. So let us assume that the length is 2 centimeters, width is 2 centimeters because it's a square, and the height in this one is 2 centimeters. For this cube, it's 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters. And this one, we'll put it at 8 by 8, and the height 8 centimeters. Okay, so let us calculate the surface area of the red cube. Now the area, we know for a square, is side by side. So it is 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters. And because there are 6 surfaces to this cube, we're going to multiply the whole thing by 6. And that answer will be, so the total surface area for the red cube is 24 centimeters. Similarly, the surface area for one of the surfaces on the blue cube is 4 by 4. And there are 6 surfaces, so 4 by 4 by 6 will give us a total of 96 centimeters squared, of course. Similarly, it's 8 by 8 multiplied by each 6 surfaces, and we'll get 384 centimeters. So that is the total surface area for each of these cubes. Now let us look at the volume. The volume is the amount of space taken up within the object. So the volume of a cube is length by height by width. So in this case, it's 2 by 2 by 2, which will give us 8 centimeters cubed. The volume here, 4 by 4 by 4, we'll get 64 centimeters cubed. And the volume of the big yellow cube is 8 by 8 by 8, which will give us 512 centimeters cubed. Now, if we were to compare the surface area to the volume, we are going to get a surface area to volume ratio. And that is going to be critical in explaining why some organisms are able to just simply take in substances and some can't. So, surface area here to volume, so we have 24 over 8. In this case, the answer here is 3. Surface area, total surface area to volume, here the answer is 1.5. And the surface area here to volume in the large yellow cube is 0.75. So look at the pattern that has been established. The smaller the object, the larger its surface area to volume ratio. The larger the object, the smaller its surface area to volume ratio. So let me explain it like this. Imagine this is your small red box or red cube. The surface area is all the surface, all this area here on the outside of the object. And the volume is what is on the inside. So in this case, the volume on the inside is smaller than the total surface area, as opposed to a larger object, let us say like this box, which has more volume on the inside when you compare it comparatively to the total surface. So what does that mean in biology? It means the larger the organism, the smaller the surface area to volume ratio. This is a fact that you must know in continuing this course. Know that the larger the organism, the smaller the surface area to volume ratio. And we did establish that from this calculation, as you can see. The larger the object, the smaller its surface area to volume ratio. So what does that mean in terms of biology and transport? It means that smaller unicellular organisms, example, amoebas, which are one cell big, they can simply diffuse substances through their surface, that surface area there, the cell membrane, and into the entire organism, right? So simple diffusion would work for small organisms, in particularly unicellular organisms. However, the more complex and multicellular an organism becomes, it cannot simply undergo diffusion. It will take too long. So you have to use a more complex system in order to get substances into the body. So for example, look at yourself. You are multicellular. Think about all the matter that makes up the inside of you. So the volume on the inside is much larger than your surface. So it means that it's going to take a very, very long time. Let us say you want a cell in your spleen or in your heart or in your kidney to obtain oxygen or to obtain some kind of nutrient from the food you just ate. If you were to just simply diffuse it through your cell, through your skin, into each cell all the way to the inside, it's going to take too long. So you need a system that is going to effectively transport nutrients and oxygen to every single cell in your body. So let's go that again. The fact is, which you need to know, the smaller organisms can use simple diffusion. Large multicellular organisms like ourselves need to have a more complex system, a transport system, in order to effectively carry things around the body. So like I said, the amoeba is a unicellular organism. So if you look at its surface, all of this is its total surface area here. The surface area is much larger than the amount of space on the inside. So it can simply diffuse substances through its cell membrane into the organism. And the more complex you get, for example, the jellyfish is a little more complex, but it can also undergo simple diffusion because the surface area, all of its surface area is larger than the amount of volume on the inside. And so as you get more and more complex, you're going to need a more complex system in order to effectively transport materials around the body. So plants are multicellular as well, and they need a complex system. Mammals are more complex than an amoeba, has more volume on the inside, and therefore would need another system and cannot rely on diffusion only. And of course, humans. We are large organisms, so we have a smaller surface area to volume ratio, and therefore we cannot depend on diffusion to get materials spread around the body. Okay, so what substances do we transport around the body? We transport substances like water, nutrients, hormones, oxygen and carbon dioxide, of course, and minerals. So let us now look specifically at transport in humans, otherwise called the circulatory system. So your circulatory system is made up of basically your heart and your blood vessels. Heart and blood vessels. So let us go through the structure of the heart, and we all know that the heart has one major function, which is to pump blood under pressure throughout the body. So let us look first at the chambers. Your heart comprises of 4 main chambers, and here they are. You have the right atrium and the left atrium. Now, why is the right and left on the opposite sides? That is because when you look at the diagram on a page, the right side will be on the left-hand side. So if you hold the book in front of you or you stand this way, you know that this is the left side of your heart. Okay? So the left atrium, the atria are the upper chambers, and the lower chambers are your ventricles. Of course, you have a right and a left ventricle. So here's a compartment for your right atria, and here is your left atria. That's one chamber, and the other chamber is right here. Here is the right ventricle, and here is your left ventricle. You will notice that the wall of the left ventricle is much thicker than the wall of the right ventricle, and that is to allow for the pressure under which the blood is going to be leaving the heart and going on towards out of the body, out of the heart towards the rest of the body. So it needs to be a thicker, muscular structure there to withstand the pressure of the pumping of the blood. Next, we would like to look at the valves between the chambers. So we have the atrioventricular valve here. Atrioventricular, how would you remember this? The word atrio from atrium and ventricular from ventricle. So it's the valve between the atrium and the ventricle. So we have on the right-hand side, we have the tricuspid valves, which are these right here. And on the left, we have another set of atrioventricular valves, but in this case, they are called bicuspid valves. And these are the valves right here on the right-hand side. Remember, atrioventricular valves are the valves between the atria and the ventricle. So these valves are going to control the flow of blood between the two chambers. Next, we want to look at the vessels that feed the heart. So let's look at the right-hand side first. So here we have the superior vena cava, which feeds blood, brings blood in to the heart from the head and the arms. And we have the inferior vena cava, which brings blood to the heart from the rest of the body. Now I want to point out with something which may be very obvious, but your heart obviously doesn't have 2 different colors. This is just to show you diagrammatically or visually that one side of the heart has or contains what is known as deoxygenated blood, which would be the areas represented in the blue, and on the left-hand side, the areas represented by red would contain oxygenated blood. And I'm going to explain the difference between the two in a little while. So we have coming in from the head through the superior vena cava and from the rest of the body from the inferior vena cava. So these two feed into the right atria first, and we also have leaving the ventricle, the right ventricle, we have here, leaving the right ventricle, we have the pulmonary arteries. So these arteries, one splits to the right, one splits to the left, these go both to your lungs. So these are going to your lungs. Another set of blood vessels you need to know would be the pulmonary vein. So these are coming from the lungs. The pulmonary veins coming from the lungs back into the heart. And you need to know, lastly, this vessel here is called the aorta. That is the largest artery in the body, and it's the biggest one that leaves the heart. So this one leaves the heart and goes to all different parts of the body. So goes to the head and down this way to the rest of the body. Now, the system that we have as mammals, or circulatory system, is called a double circulatory system. It's called a double circulatory system. Why is it called double? It's called double because in one circuit, the blood enters the heart 2 times. It's called double because in one circuit of the circulation of the blood enters the heart twice. So let us go through the rhythm of a normal or one heartbeat. And normally if you listen to your heartbeat, you would hear lub-dub, lub-dub. And I know that we say the heart never rests, but in actual fact, between the last dub, the sound that you hear, and the first lub, there's a very, very minute pause, fraction of a second. So your heart beats lub-dub, lub-dub. So there's a minuscule pause, and that is what we call diastole, when there's no contraction taking place. So let us go through what happens to your heart. Now remember, your heart is 4-chambered, okay? So we have the atria at the top, and blood comes in from the body here, and from the head here on the right atria, and comes in here from the lungs on the left atria. And they both come in at the same time and naturally or passively feeds into the ventricles. So there's no contraction taking place at this point. The blood is just naturally flowing through. And if you notice, these valves here, these are called semilunar valves. Those valves are closed. So when you hear that closing, that shutting, that's the first sound you hear when you listen to your heartbeat. So this prevents the closure of these 2 valves here, prevent blood, any blood that was in here, it prevents the blood from flowing backwards into the ventricles here. So let us go. We have the atria filling up, and then we have systole, which is a contraction. So both atria contract at the same time and pushes or squeezes the blood down into the ventricles, both right and left ventricles. Okay, so atrial systole, both atria contract at the same time and push blood down into both ventricles at the same time. So obviously for that to happen, the atrioventricular valves, both the tricuspid and bicuspid valves, would need to be open. Immediately after that systolic action there, then we have the ventricles will now contract, and those will push blood out to 2 different blood vessels. So in the diagram, you can see the right atria, the right ventricle, is going to push the blood up through the pulmonary arteries, and the left ventricle will push that blood up into the aorta. So both atria contract first, squeeze and push the blood into the ventricles, and then both ventricles contract at the same time. One pushes the blood towards your lungs, the other one pushes the blood to your aorta, which will then transport that blood around your body. So here you have the semilunar valves will now open. This one towards the pulmonary arteries to your lungs, and this one is going to open and push the blood to your aorta, which is going to send the blood around your body. Now, why is the blood going to your lungs? Remember we talked about deoxygenated and oxygenated blood? The blood coming in here from your body and from your head is deoxygenated, meaning it has a low amount of oxygen. Oxygen was used up by your cells, and now the blood is going back to the heart to be pushed to your lungs to pick up oxygen to start the cycle again. So the first entrance into your heart would be here, deoxygenated blood, and then we also have oxygenated blood coming from your lungs here. So this here is oxygenated blood. So the blood goes one to your lungs, one to your body. The blood that went to your lungs is now going to come back here for the second pumping action to take it out to your aorta. So double circulatory system, the blood enters your heart twice. Once it comes in from your body to your heart, and it is then pushed to your lungs. At your lungs, it will collect oxygen, come back to your heart, and then pumped out again to your body. So that's twice in one circuit that the blood enters your heart. Okay, now I've inserted this picture here just to point out the fact that just like your plumbing system at home, you have two sets of tubes from each, let's say from a sink. So you have this one here, which should be your supply line. So this is your supply line, which is going to be bringing the fresh potable water. And then you have your waste line, right? So that is going to carry the water, the drainage out away from the sink. So let us assume that this sink is synonymous to an organ. So for each organ, you have vessels which are coming and going from each organ. I need to point this out to you because some diagrams show as if blood is coming in one side of the body and leaving on the right-hand side, which is not an accurate depiction of what is actually happening. So for each organ, if you have organs at each location, you will see two different sets of blood vessels, right? You will see one in blue and one in red. Again, obviously, your body does not have red and blue blood vessels. This is just ease of visualization, right? So for each organ, you will see two sets of blood vessels, one coming and one going, all over your body. So we have two major blood vessels. We have arteries, which carry blood away from the heart. And I like to tell my students A for arteries and A for away. So arteries take blood away from the heart in all cases. And then we have veins. Veins carry blood towards the heart. Now, when an artery has left the heart, it of course is large and it has a large amount of muscle to withstand the pressure of the pumping of the heart. But as it enters or gets closer to an organ, for example, it starts to branch. So each of these branches will be called an arteriole. So these are arterioles, and they just get smaller and smaller as they branch off, entering an organ. So let us say that the organ here is a kidney. So in the kidneys, you have these very tiny network of blood vessels. These are called your capillaries. So your capillaries are here, and the arterioles are bringing that oxygenated blood from the heart. They're going to give up the oxygen to the cells of the kidney, for example, and they're going to take up carbon dioxide from the cells of the kidneys. These will then leave the organ, in this case the kidney or any organ. They would leave the organ, and these tiny blood vessels, when they're leaving the organ, are called venules. So the venules will join up to form what you know as the vein, and the vein will take that deoxygenated blood back to the heart. Okay, so this is the sort of diagram that you will see in your textbooks and on the internet. I just want to remind you that your body is not divided into two perfect halves. You don't have oxygenated blood on one side and deoxygenated blood on the next side, okay? But this is just for ease of understanding how the circulatory system is made up. So we have blood leaving the heart. This blood is going to be oxygenated, and it will take blood, oxygenated blood, to all your various organs and give up the oxygen at the organs and then take up carbon dioxide, which will then transport it to veins back to the heart. From the heart, it will go to your lungs to take up oxygen again, back to the heart, because the lungs cannot pump blood. So it has to go back to the heart, and then that force of the pumping of the blood will then push that oxygenated blood back around the body. So that is why we have a double circulatory system. So your syllabus asks for you to be aware of the names of the different blood vessels associated with different organs. So if you have for your liver, all of your blood vessels associated with your liver are called hepatic. So remember I said you have two tubes, each leaving an organ. So you have the hepatic artery, which is bringing blood to the liver, and you have the hepatic vein, which is the blood vessel taking deoxygenated blood from the liver. So anything associated with liver, you would hear the word hepatic. The hepatic portal vein is a very special vein, and that is the one taking blood from your stomach, or your intestines rather, to the liver first, and then to the heart. So it's a portal. So you just need to learn that one separately. The hepatic portal vein is the vein taking blood from the intestines to the liver first for processing, and then that's the processing of the digested food, and then it will go to the heart. Anything associated with your kidneys are called renal. So your renal artery brings blood to the kidneys, and your renal vein takes blood away from your kidneys. You also need to know the vessel taking blood to the heart, and we dealt with that, is the vena cava. You have the superior, which is bringing blood from your head, and the blood from your rest of the body to your heart will be your inferior vena cava. So vena cava is that vein. It's a vein, and it is taking blood to the heart, and blood leaving the heart is in the aorta. So the aorta is that large vessel leaving the heart, and vena cava is the large vein going towards the heart. Anything associated with your lungs will be called pulmonary. So you hear pulmonary embolism. So it's something related to your lungs. So pulmonary artery would be the vessel leaving the heart going towards your lung, and pulmonary vein would be the one bringing blood to the heart from the lungs. So pulmonary is associated with your lungs. What the diagram does not show is the blood vessels going to your head. So to your head, you have your carotid artery. This one is taking blood from the aorta and going towards your head. And from your head, of course, we dealt with the superior vena cava. Okay? So you need to know the names of the major blood vessels associated with different organs in your body. Okay, so I inserted this because I found that it looked really, really cool. And this is just showing you the assortment of different blood vessels in one arm. So here you have a major blood vessel here. Now, from the diagram, I cannot tell you whether it's an artery or a vein, but you can see the network of capillaries, especially in the tips of your fingers. So you have many different blood vessels, and many of them would mostly be arteries that are taking oxygen to and from your different tissues. Okay, so the major blood vessels, we have been mentioning them already. We know that we have arteries, we have veins, we have capillaries, and that our small arteries are called arterioles, and our small veins are called venules. So let us look mainly at the artery, the vein, and the capillaries in terms of their structure and then their function. So the artery and the vein have similar structures, but their densities are different. So you have this thick outer wall here, made up mainly of connective tissue, and then you have this wall of muscle. So here we have an artery. And how do you recognize an artery? There is this, think of a hose, and this is the blood will flow through this area here. So in an artery, this hole or lumen is very small. The lumen is small, and the muscular band or this thick layer here of muscle is very thick. When you compare it to a vein, which has a large lumen, so the hole or the space which the blood flows through is called a lumen. When you compare it to the artery, the veins lumen is quite large, and you can see here the band of muscle is not as thick as in the artery. And why is that so? Obviously, blood leaving the body in an artery is under high pressure. So you need this thick wall of muscle to withstand the pressure of the blood leaving the heart. The veins are just taking blood from your organs back to your heart. So at that point, the blood is not under a lot of pressure, so there's no need for the thick band of muscle in your veins. And capillaries, these have a small, very tiny lumen, understandably, because it's a much smaller blood vessel, and they're only made up of a single layer of cells. One layer of cells, so there are no connective tissue, there are no muscles or anything like that. It's just one literal layer of cells and a very tiny lumen. And why is that so? To allow for quick diffusion of your gases to and from your organs. Okay, so you need to be able to know the differences between the artery, vein, and capillaries, and these are they listed here. So we can go through a few of them. In terms of the thickness of the wall, the artery's wall is very thick, while the vein is thinner than your arteries. And of course, the capillary is very thin. Let us look at direction of blood flow. Blood in your arteries flow away from your heart, and blood in your veins flow towards your heart. Oxygen transported. You need to know this one because this can trip you up in multiple choice questions. In your artery, the arteries always carry oxygenated blood, and I want to take a note of except this one here, except the pulmonary artery. Remember that pulmonary artery is the artery leaving the heart and going towards the lungs. It's the only artery in your body that is carrying deoxygenated blood. So your pulmonary artery is the only artery that's carrying deoxygenated blood. It is still carrying blood away from the heart, but remember, that is the blood that was coming in from the body. So it doesn't have as much oxygen as the other side. And of course, in the veins, veins carry deoxygenated blood, with the exception of the pulmonary vein, which is the only vein carrying oxygenated blood. So you need to know these differences between your arteries, your veins, and your capillaries.